Hello, everyone, and welcome to the ESG-CV quarterly reporting office hours for city and county recipients. My name is Tommy Joe Bednar. I'm going to go ahead and share a few pieces of logistical and housekeeping information with you today before we get into the regular presentation. We hope that all of you can hear us currently and can hear me quite well, but if you have difficulty with audio or want a more stable connection, we encourage you to go ahead and call in, and we'll share that call-in information in the chat in just a moment. But we encourage you to call in. It has a little bit better audio. That number is on the screen, and be sure to use the access code, the second one listed there, ending in 3888 for Wednesday, December 16th. All participants will be muted during this presentation, but we do hope that you will ask questions, share experiences in the chat. To open the chat, click on the box in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen. The screenshot has it outlined in a red box right now. So again, there's that button that says chat and has a chat bubble. If you click on that, it'll open a chat window on the right-hand side of your screen. And please just make sure that the to box on your chat message says everyone. That will make sure that your message or question goes to not only all of our panelists today, but also everyone else attending so that your experiences can be shared and other people can see what questions have been asked. As I'm sure many of you are curious about, today's session is being recorded, and that recording, along with the slide deck and the materials from today, will be posted in the HUD Exchange in about 2 to 3 business days. Give us a few days to make those available, and all of those materials will be available to you. With that, I want to make sure to share with you all and introduce our wonderful presenters today. We have Marlisa Grogan from HUD, Office of Special Needs Assistance Programs, Michelle Budzik from the Partnership Center Limited, myself from Apt Associates, doing some WebEx management in the background, and some other staff from the Partnership Center Limited as well. With that, I'm going to go ahead and hand things over to Marlisa Grogan. Marlisa?
Thank you. Hi, everybody. It's great to be here with you today. We wanted to take this opportunity to meet with you all and provide you all with the most up-to-date information we have on ESG-CV quarterly reporting, especially as it pertains to the first quarter, Q1 in SAGE. Next slide, please. To start us off, we want to remind everyone of the different roles that you, the recipient, as well as your sub-recipients, HMIS leads, or victim service providers play in the data submission process for quarterly reporting. So we are focusing on you, the city and county direct recipients of ESG-CV funds. We're using the term recipient to refer to you, the city and counties who receive direct funding from HUD. And you, the recipients, are responsible for reporting for funding in SAGE. So you are the recipient. You are the entity that signs the grant agreement directly with your local HUD field office. Subrecipients are the entities that you contract with to provide services or to be a pass-through entity for funding a community. So either those providers that directly provide services, or in the case of a pass-through entity, like an entity that would sub to a second-tier subrecipient that then does the actual service provision. So shelter providers, rapid rehousing providers, the direct service provider. When it comes to the HMIS lead contact, we're referring to the person at the agency that oversees the HMIS implementation and is responsible for generating the report information from HMIS. So this is a little different from the way things typically run for the annual CAPER. But the HMIS lead contact, as well as victim service provider contacts, are those entities that are responsible for generating the bundles that SAGE identifies that need to be created based on recipients' data about projects in their report. There are two additional items that I really want to stress. The email that recipients send out go to the HMIS lead contact or the victim service provider, not to your subrecipients. So that's one thing to keep in mind, that the emails you're generating from SAGE as the recipient go to the HMIS lead contact or the victim service provider contact responsible for generating the bundles. And if you are a recipient who's also the HMIS lead, make sure that you are entering your system administrator or your sysadmin for the HMIS as a contact person, not like programmatic staff. So we want to make sure that the contact person is the HMIS system administrator. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Michelle Budzik so she can take us through some more details about SAGE.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us again. I see a question from somebody asking about if they're a subrecipient, do they need to stay on this call? And no, if you're a subrecipient, you can have an hour back in your day. You don't need to stay on this call. Certainly, if you want to, you're welcome to stay. But if you're a subrecipient, there's nothing for you to do in this. We're going to take a look at what's going to go on in the first quarter, and especially what's going on if in the initial period you either didn't report because you hadn't executed a grant agreement, or didn't report because you hadn't expended any funding, or didn't have your subrecipients under contract. Those are the ones that are going to be the most different this time, although everybody will get some tips from this. So we just want to point out that if you go to your dashboard and it says that your initial period is either in progress or not started, you have to submit that initial period before you can even start on Q1. Q1 will not open for you until you submit that initial period. So we know we have some. There's just a few of you that have forgot to press submit. The whole thing's done, but you didn't press submit. We've been trying to call you for the past week. If you get in there and see, whoops, that was me, I didn't press submit, please press submit and send it in, and then you're ready to go for Q1. When you begin your form, when you begin your report, you'll see the reporting requirements form. Whatever you checked last time is going to be there this time. Think of this as a cumulative, what have I done in ESG-CV form. So if you funded last time your HMIS and admin, those are going to be darkened. You're not going to be able to check them again because you've already funded them. And now you can add, if this time you're going to, your shelters are all under contract, you're going to add your shelters and maybe your rapid rehousing, then you'll click shelter and rapid rehousing also. So each quarter, as you go in, you update this reporting requirements form to be sure it includes everything that you're doing now. Everything you did in the past is already there. Don't have to worry about it. It's everything, anything new you're doing now has to get checked. If there were projects missing in the initial report in SAGE because you did not have to file a report, so in the initial period, which was anything from the start of your program, which could have been as early as January 21st through the end of September, if in that period you reported that you didn't have an executed grant agreement or that you didn't spend any money. Now you're going to come in for Q1, which is this last quarter of the year, right? It's the federal fiscal quarters that we're counting here. So it's Q1 you're coming into. And you will report then on everything all the way back to the initial period if you didn't report before, or if you missed somebody from the first report. You had most of your subs under contract, you went through with them and put them all in, but one of them wasn't. So you did the report, you submitted the report, and now you want to come in and bring this one in that actually was going back to your original period. So what your screen is going to show is that you can identify the project not just as starting this quarter, October, November, and December, but actually going back and starting the date of your initial reporting period that you had selected. If you have to add something here that was not in the previous report, Sage is going to turn on a question for you that's numbered 3A, and we're asking for a brief narrative of why did you not report it in the initial period. So the brief narrative could be XYZ Shelter had not signed a contract yet, and we couldn't report on them until now, or none of our subs had contracts, or whatever your issue was that you didn't report on them. HUD just wants to know why you didn't report on them so that they have record, kind of a documentation of why you're reporting something now for the previous period. If you are adding projects that were missing in the initial report, you do not have to amend your financial forms. We are not amending ESG-CV reports. You can't send AAQ a question and ask for it to be reopened so you can fix it. We're not amending reports. So if you have expenditures that were missing from the initial reporting period that were expended, for example, your subs weren't under contract, you let them go back to July 1st, now you have all this money from July 1st to the end of the year that you need to report on, you will put that all in this quarter. So you will show all of that happening now in the active quarter, and then the cumulatives will go forward. The new projects data, if you put in a new project that you didn't have in the past, that you started on July 1, back in the initial period, they would have put in a quarterly report. We're not going to ask for that quarterly report. You do not have to go in and put that quarterly report in. Sage will not generate that for you. You will just put in a quarterly report for this quarter, and you will put in a cumulative report for them. So they will be included in both this quarter's report, if they're still active, and the cumulative report. We won't go back and collect data, and we're going to use all of the data off of the cumulative report for reporting for the initial period, since so many of you were late starters. Now that's what you do if the project was completely missing in the initial report. But we know that there's also projects that you started late. For example, people didn't start their homelessness prevention projects yet. The eviction moratorium hadn't ended, right? And maybe you haven't even started them now, and maybe you'll start them over the next year. You will be able to anytime you have a late starting project, add that project to Sage. So your project list will come up. It's auto-populated. It's going to, everything you put in last quarter is in there this quarter. You don't have to retype all that stuff. But you can add a new project, and then to add a new project that's a late starting project, obviously if it's late, it didn't start in the initial period at 7/1. It would have started sometime during this quarter, October, November, or December. And you're going to be able to pick that. And then that will just go into the regular bundles like it's supposed to go. If you ended a project, it's an early ender. You funded a project in the initial period because, you know, COVID was just really rampant, and you opened special temporary emergency shelters, and now, God willing, this is going to be over, and you closed them. So you may pick the month that you closed any project, and that project will only come in the quarterly bundle to the extent it was funded for. It will continue to come into the cumulative bundle for the rest of the 2 years. You'll always have those people in your bundle, but you'll no longer be pulling them in your quarterly reports. So you can stop a project anytime you need to stop it over the course of the year. The financial information form, we want to remind you, is about expenditures, not draw funds. So you do not have to draw the funds from IDIS to report them. And at this point, everyone should have a process in place in your community that you're gathering the information from your subrecipients about their expenditures prior to your reporting for the quarter. So you do not have to have paid the sub to list their expenses, nor do you have to draw the funds to list their expenses, but you have to get their expenses and put them in the report. Just so you're aware, we know that your expenditures in your ESG-CV report will probably exceed the draws that you have made from IDIS. And there's no field officer that's sitting around trying to compare that your ESG-CV report and your IDIS report match, because we know they won't. If you don't have to draw them, they don't have to match. And so you don't need to worry about balancing these two to the precise penny, because if you haven't drawn it, it's just not going to match. We are really strongly recommending that you ask your subrecipients for reports on a monthly basis so that you can keep up with it. But we really want you to ask for them at least for the quarter by the 15th day of the month, so that you have enough time to compile to review those and compile all of that data. If you're a small city and you only have one project or a couple of projects, it's not such a big deal. If you're New York City, it is a big deal. You know, it just depends on your size.
Can we pause there, Michelle, real fast for a couple of financial questions?
Yep.
Michelle, I think one of the persons, we had a couple questions come in about the idea of when signed agreements and executions happen, when they're reporting. So the first example, Carolyn was asking, I understand that if we don't execute any of our ESG-CV agreements until February and they have expenditures back to July, we report all of those expenditures in quarter two?
We have not made that decision that this is going to go like this forward. We've made the decision that it's going to go for Q1. Marlisa, did you have anything to add to that?
Yes, I would just say that if you don't have your subrecipient grant agreements executed, then we wouldn't consider any funds incurred by a subrecipient as actual ESG incurred costs. So, no, you wouldn't be reporting on any expenditures because we wouldn't consider those ESG expenditures until the subrecipient relationship has been, formally executed and documented in a subrecipient grant agreement. But it is the case that you could be spending admin funds or HMIS funds. So I don't think that we could make the determination across the board that you wouldn't have anything else to report on. But as far as the subrecipient incurred costs, you'd wait to report on those until you have the agreements in place.
Okay, and then so similar to that, I think, but going the other direction, Paula was asking. So if she's correct that if we have a signed agreement on say July of 2020 this year for homelessness prevention, but nothing has been expended yet, is it correct that we don't add it because nothing has been expended? We only add it once there's an expenditure. That's
correct. So even if you contracted with a provider, and I think homelessness prevention is one of those that this is going to happen to, or we know has happened to, where they contracted with a provider to do prevention of evictions, and while there was a moratorium, it just didn't make sense to do. So nothing's been expended. Just don't put that on your project form as starting until it actually starts, and then start it in the month that they actually start expending funding.
Great. And then we've got one last question. You covered when what happens if you find out there's additional costs that you're kind of back paying for. But someone had a question here where, for example, they said in the first reporting quarter, one of my subrecipients said they expended $10,500. That's what they reported. But after they actually got all the invoices, they found that they had actually spent less money. They only spent $10,000, so it was less. What should I do about this?
Subtract the $500 from this quarter's report. This is not high finance. And I know, the biggest question that we've been asked is my auditor going to have a heart attack about this? Maybe. We can't speak to that, but you're going to get it as close as you could possibly get it to what's actually expended. And I know, having sat in your shoes, that there are times that you're going to take it in, you're going to say, okay, they expended all this, and when you actually get down to paying the bills, you're going to say, oh, wait, we're not paying this. And there's one thing that you're not paying that's going to get thrown out. That's okay. We know that. Just make the adjustment in this quarter. HUD understands that. Can I keep going, guys? I will then.
Yeah, go for it.
So let's talk a little bit about bundles and what the client level data is. So we're bringing in, de-identified client level data in a regular ESG CAPER report, the same report that you provide in your annual report. What's different about this is that we're putting the projects that you funded that are the same component type with the same start and end date from the same HMIS system in a bundle. What does that bundle do? It unduplicates all those people. So if you had the same guy at 5 different shelters over the course of the year, in the regular ESG, if you reported each shelter individually, we would think that you had sheltered 5 different people because that guy would get reported 5 times. But if we bundle it together, the HMIS unduplicates those people, and now that guy is just 1. And so because the shelters are really a huge amount of what is being funded with ESG-CV, we want to make sure that we can get that down to as unduplicated of a number as possible. So a bundle is always the same component, the same start and end date, and the same HMIS or victim service provider. A bundle can include one project or multiple projects. We're just using the word bundle, so even if it's just a one project thing, we're still calling it a bundle. Beginning this quarter, there's a quarterly bundle and a cumulative bundle. The quarterly bundle will be for October, November, and December activities, the people served in that time period, and the cumulative bundle will go back to your start date and bring in all the projects and people from your start date into the cumulative bundle. If you start and stop projects over the period, like we showed you earlier, you could add a project that's a late starter, or you could end a project that it's an early ender. That's going to cause that cumulative bundle to change what is coming in it. And so you can actually be asking for multiple cumulative bundles from the HMIS because the report start date and end date changed for a project, and that pulled the project out of that cumulative bundle. That's how we're ending that person's that activity. It is the most complex thing we have ever done, I think, to put these bundles together and make them right. My whole staff that programs SAGE, and we work on this like all day long, every day, on reporting. It took all of us multiple hours to check that the bundles were really going in the correct place in SAGE when we started and stopped programs. And we drew that out for you in an example that's in a guide that's just been published today on the HUD Exchange. That's a supplemental reporting guide. We know how hard it is, and it's not your job to figure that out. Whatever SAGE says is in the bundle is what's in the bundle. It's not the responsibility of the HMIS to figure that out. Whatever SAGE says is in the bundle is in the bundle. The only time that an HMIS could tell you that something is wrong is because they didn't have that project in their system for that time period that you're calling for it. But otherwise, the bundles are being set by SAGE, and that takes the burden off of you for figuring it out. And I don't know how to tell you stronger, you should be grateful for that, because it is a royal problem to try to figure it out yourself. It's just not doable. When the recipient sends the email from SAGE with the HMIS or VSP portal link, the contact will be able to indicate which projects are in their CSV upload compared to which projects you've called for, and there has to be a match on that. They have to match it or they can't submit it. So there's a check and balance that's going on at the HMIS end also. What we have found that Marlisa alluded to before is if the HMIS person and the ESG person is the same person, it seems to happen in some localities where the person responsible for ESG from the jurisdiction is also the same person that administers HMIS or that's part of the HMIS team or just has access to HMIS data. And so they're trying to pull it themselves. We would just tell you that in our experience now after the first quarter, every time that happened in a community, almost every time it happened, we had to fix it because there was no check and balance. The check and balance kind of disappears when you're one person doing the whole thing. And if you're bigger than a couple of projects, you really don't want to do that. It's really, it's just, our experience now says, don't do it. put 2 people on it. We're suggesting a timeline for you just to help, because one of the biggest problems we had last time was that the recipients did not request the bundles until the end of the reporting period. It takes time for the HMIS leads to do this, and so we're suggesting really strongly that by the 5th day of the month, you're able to request those bundles. You're pressing send bundles. The victim service providers and HMIS have a 3-day hold window that they cannot upload data to Sage for. That 3 business day hold means that the HMIS leads are supposed to be going in there and checking that you have sent them the right project and the right component and that everything's okay and they're going to be able to pull the data. If they call you and say, or email you and say, whoops, there's a mistake here, you've got to correct that mistake in this time period here. Otherwise, you're going to have to put in an AAQ, and we're going to have to correct it with you. So within this time period, if you make a mistake on anything you've done here, you can pull the bundles back. You can redo them. It's no big deal. You know, like no harm, no foul. If you end up not doing that, then it's a problem at the end. We're suggesting that after that 3 business day period, you give them a few days to pull the actual data. Some of the systems are very easy to pull this data from and very easy to do these bundles. Some of the systems require the system admin to actually set up reporting procedures that allow them to bundle different projects together at different times. And so just depends on the system that you're pulling from. It's that. The other thing is that if the city funded a project and the county funded the same project and the state funded the same project, the HMIS lead is getting asked for that project being pulled in multiple different ways. So it's not just you asking them for the data, it's other people too. And just a reminder that HUD has allowed you to pay those HMIS leads out of ESG-CV money for doing this work. We're suggesting that at least by day 20, I know on the slide before I said day 15, between day 15 and day 20, you have the financial expenditures from your subrecipients. But on day 20, if you don't have them by day 20, you're not going to make it. Unless you have only 2 projects that you funded, aggregating these dollars and just checking them out to make sure you're trying to get them right is a problem. So they expecting them to be in by day 20 of the quarter is not unrealistic. That gives you from the 20th till the 30th to finish all the forms to make sure everything's correct. We know this isn't your full-time job and that you're doing other things too, so we want to give you enough time to make sure you can actually do it and to actually submit on the deadline. And one more time, I'm going to ask you to please be sure you've submitted. Sage will send you an email if you forgot to submit on day 31, but we're not going to badger you for the rest of your life until you submit it. So please submit on time. It's a timeliness issue that HUD is calculating on review. Our mistakes to avoid that we're just one more time just going to go over. Please be sure that it's your HMIS and victim service provider contacts that are on the form. That means it's not you. If you are the recipient, you are not also the HMIS and victim service provider contact person. The same person shouldn't be in the same place. And it's not your subrecipients. We still had people that put in all their subrecipients instead of the HMIS. They, I guess, weren't reading the directions and were just thinking about what they do for the annual report and going on forward, and that created a mess. So if you haven't done this already, please make sure you're putting in your HMIS and VSP contacts. In order to avoid late submissions, remember to plan for that 3-day hold period that we talked about earlier, to gather the expense information in a timely fashion in-house, to make sure that you have a data entry and account admin user in Sage. If you had staff changing, if you've not submitted a report before in Sage, if you've not submitted it recently and people changed, you need to have a data entry and account admin user who can actually press submit on the report. There is a report in Sage called Users Add Entity that you can run. It'll run real quick for your entity and tell you who's a registered user of Sage, and it will tell you their user level. And it just in the spirit of the holidays, we're asking you one more time to, when you make your project list, please check it twice so that we actually can get them all in and all right. Finally, the questions for Sage go through Ask a Question. We're on a speedy turnaround, generally a day. It will only take a few days if your question is more complicated, and we'll reach out to you and tell you that if we're going to be delayed with it. The AAQ desk it needs to sometimes help you unbundle or sometimes help you correct a mistake. If instead of just saying, I have a mistake, help, you tell us what exactly the mistake is. I put in XYZ project, I sent out the bundles, I need to bring back the bundles in and get rid of that project, I'm outside of the 3-day window, can you help me? If you are very specific about what the problem is, we can help you without going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. So the more detail you give us, the more chance we have of being able to fix it right there on the spot for you. And anybody that's answering your AAQ questions on the Sage desk has the ability to fix it for you right now. So giving us more questions will help, or more information will help. We also are not afraid to pick up the phone and call you, but have found that we're having a tough time doing that sometimes because so many of you are working from home, and what's on the AAQ is your business number. So if you think this is a complex question and that we're going to pick up the phone and try to call you to help you get through it or to try to figure out what the problem is, please give us a phone number where we can reach you. Otherwise, you tend to go to the end of the list again, and that's just hard when that keeps happening because we're cycling. So if you could give us, just put your cell phone number or a home phone number, whatever phone number you want us to call you at, we'll be happy to do that if we need to. And that's the end of what I have to say. We do have Sage screens available for sharing if we need to. Rob?
Great, thanks everyone. I was noticing that there were a couple questions coming in to me back on the financial part of this at the very beginning, right as we rolled off of that question. So if you think some of those early financial questions, if yours wasn't answered, if you could just repost that now. I'm sorry for kind of missing that just in the transition there. But if you had a financial one that wasn't answered, go ahead and post that now. Michelle, let's start off with an easy one that was answered in the chat, but it's a real good one just to hear. Maybe you answer again out loud. We had someone saying, hey, can I set up my next quarter bundles before the end of the quarter? What can I do ahead of time to get ready?
Yep. Super question. The day after you submit your report, your next report opens up. So you can be doing your report now, even though the quarter hasn't ended. You just, if you're going to send the bundles, we recommend you don't send the bundles until you're really sure they're all right. But you could even actually send the bundles. The 3-day hold period, if you would do that before the quarter ends, doesn't actually start counting until day 1 of the quarter. Yeah, so it's open for you. It's available for you. We hope you're doing that, especially with the holidays in here. You could get it done now. And if you submitted last quarter, it's all auto-populated for you, so it's going to be much easier, we hope.
Great. Someone was asking about the round 2 sort of funding and how that works in here. For round 2 funding, do new pages need to be created? I guess, do they need to add in new providers based on the rounds of funding?
Nope. ESG-CV reporting is a collective report of round 1 and round 2. We don't care whether you funded it in round 1 or whether you funded it in round 2. And if you funded a project in round 1 and then turned around and funded the same project in round 2, it's one project. Think of it as one project. Just because you have 2 different contracts on it from 2 different funding sources, it's one project. You don't list it as 2 projects in this report.
Great. And then we've got one just coming in back to the idea of expenditures and timing here. During the first reporting period, my HMIS lead advised me to include all projects that had signed contracts regardless of whether or not they had expenditures. As such, I included 2 homelessness prevention projects and indicated that we didn't spend any funds on them. Earlier in this webinar, you stated that we should not include projects if there weren't expenditures. What do I do about this now?
I would suspect that if you included street outreach project and you didn't show expenses for your street outreach project, your report would have been rejected by the field office. If it's not been rejected yet, it will be, because that's one of the checks and balances that we're looking for, is that if you say you funded the project in that reporting requirement step, you said you funded street outreach, SAGE is looking for, is there a street outreach CSV upload, and is there financial information in the street outreach part of the project? If you know that you're in that position, if you're the person that asked that question, if you put in an AAQ, I'll open it up and delete the projects with you that need to come out so that you're not out of balance. If they haven't rejected it yet, we can still reopen it and fix it. If they rejected it, I'm going to have to reopen it later and fix it. So it doesn't matter when it happens, we'll make it right with you, but that takes an AAQ, please.
Great. And then we've got another one from the finances early on. Taking what you said into account about expenditures earlier, what if you reported expenses on your first report, yet there was no executed agreement? We emailed our subrecipients to get their expenses for a few of the categories we reported, and we reported those in SAGE. The report was accepted by our local HUD office.
That's fine. That's fine. We know some of you did it without having the subrecipients under contract. What HUD also knew was that you couldn't require them to get it, so they couldn't require you to report it if you couldn't require the subrecipient to submit it to you before there was a contract signed. So if you've already did it, you're ahead of the game. Great for you. No harm, no foul. Let's keep going.
Wonderful. And at that point, I think that's the end of the questions I'm seeing right now. I've got one coming in here about bundles. I'm a bit confused on bundles. Who creates the bundles, and are the bundles the activities? So maybe a quick bundle refresher there again about that term.
So in SAGE, you've listed all your projects, and you've listed the start date and the end date of every project, or if it's an ongoing project, it just says ongoing. You list all of those. That's all you have to do. SAGE then calculates which projects go where. So if you're a small city or a regular city that only has one HMIS, this isn't quite as confusing than if you're a state that might have 10 different HMIS systems across the state. But if you're a small city, think of it as we're going to ask the HMIS lead for all of the emergency shelter projects that you funded during the period to all come in one CSV upload. So instead of having all those individual uploads, you funded 5 projects, you'd normally have 5 uploads coming in. You'd be running after 5 sub-recipients to get these submitted. That's what you do annually, right? Probably. They either do it or you're running after them to get them to do it. They don't all have to do it. There's just one going out to an HMIS lead. They're generating one report, and by doing that, they unduplicate all those extra people. Yes, a bundle is like activities, not subrecipients. Component activity, component equals emergency shelter, component equals rapid rehousing. So if you have rapid rehousing and 5 different subrecipients doing rapid rehousing, it's going to bundle all 5 of those subrecipients into one rapid rehousing report and send it in. Got it.
Michelle, can we talk a little bit about project names? It's funny, this conversation actually came up on the sysadmin call that we had earlier also. So there's some confusion about recipients that called a project name one thing that did not align with what was in the HMIS, and now they would like to get those names into alignment. Is there a way that they can change the names in Sage to match what they are in HMIS?
Not on your own. If that is a major issue for your community, we would have to go in the back end and do that for you. Once you put a project in and you've sent out the bundles and you've received the bundles back, it's a done deal. It's fixed in there, and you can't get rid of it so that you can't get rid of it in your cumulative reporting, so it just won't accidentally come out. So, no, you can't just easily change that. If it is a major issue for you, put an AAQ in and give me a list, please. The project names are nothing short of a mess. We have drop-downs in there for you to use that are of your agency, so you get the agency right. If you ever funded the agency in a previous quarter, in a regular CAPER, we put those in for you, and we tried to put in the subrecipients. If you're funding a new project that's not on that list, just type it in. Unlike a normal drop-down box, you can type in a new provider in it. But we put those in there to try to at least get the provider names right. And as we sorted all of the CAPER data nationally to try to get this ready for you, it is unbelievable how bad the project naming is between either what you're calling the project and what's coming up in the HMIS. And we're real clear. We know the HMISs have not followed the naming convention rules that are spelled out in the data standards, and they're putting all kinds of other things in there too. But it should be the name of the project, at least as it's commonly known on the street, so they could recognize the project. They have to be able to recognize what you're sending them.
Great. And we had a question about what's the best resource to reference for the HMIS data entry expectations, in this case for a day shelter funded with ESG-CV dollars.
We expect that that the emergency shelter is collecting all of the elements of a night-by-night shelter. So folks are coming and going, and they need to be able to do an intake and either exit them every night or do an auto exit or whatever they need to do to make that work with the data standards. If they don't know how to do that specifically because they've never done a day shelter and are having some questions, if they put in an AAQ to the HMIS desk, that desk will help them figure out how exactly to collect the data. we recognize that in night-by-night shelters, in temporary emergency shelters, in day shelters, your data quality is not going to be stellar. We get that. HUD gets that. They understand that, you know, a guy sleeping on the street, the first thing he's not going to give up is his Social Security number to you. So we're not, the expectation of data quality is not as high in this arena at this time as it normally is.
So we had a kind of a follow-up to that about whether there's an ESG-CV guidebook.
There, guidebook is a funny word. There is guidance online. If you, on your ESG's Launchpad, there's a big thing that says guidance. If you click on that, the guidance will come up, and there is also supplemental guidance that goes for Q1. That's not there yet on Sage. It'll probably be there tomorrow or the next day, and that'll also be available to you. It's all available online on the HUD Exchange.
All right, and then we've got another one here. We're purchasing a vehicle for a sub-recipient's street outreach. Do they need to do the quarterly reporting?
Marlisa?
So if you're purchasing a vehicle for a sub-recipient street outreach program, I'm a little unclear if you are just sub-awarding funds, so the sub-recipient can purchase the street outreach vehicle, but in either case, if you're purchasing a vehicle, I think I guess I'm having a number of additional questions that are popping up in my head. If it's the purchase of the vehicle is for an overhead cost for carrying out supportive services, but yes, they would need to do quarterly reporting because the expectation is that you're purchasing the vehicle for essential services under the street outreach project. So you would have expenditures associated with the purchase of the vehicle as well as the associated supportive services that are being performed with the vehicle. But if I'm not getting the fact pattern correct there, please follow up with an additional question.
No, that's great, Marlisa, because remember that in the HMIS, this street outreach project is entering clients. Some way, shape, or form, they're entering clients. And so if you bought a vehicle for existing street outreach project, then they've already got clients in there, and they're just going to be adding to their record. If you bought a vehicle for a new street outreach project, it's going to be a new project set up in the HMIS, and then they're going to be entering clients into that record. So we don't care if the guy got in the van or not. We're not counting trips in a van. We're not counting people that got van services. We're counting street outreach clients. So everybody in the street outreach program is going to be reported. It's like an emergency shelter. If you put $1 in an emergency shelter, everybody counts. Street outreach works the same way. Put a buck in street outreach, everybody in the project counts, whether they got in the van or not.
Awesome. Thanks for that. We got someone who sounds like they're a recipient who's also doing direct service, if I'm reading this correct. And they write, I'm a bit confused with the reporting. If my city will be running the homeless prevention and rapid housing programs in-house, will we be reporting through we will be reporting through HMIS, and we'll also be bundling with other sub-recipients. Would that be correct? That their in-house sort of prevention and rapid rehousing is going to be part of a bundle. I guess it may be another way of asking that.
So, Amy, are you a sub-recipient or a recipient?
On the particular question that I was feeling right now is from Elizabeth Garcia.
Oh, is she a sub-recipient or a recipient?
Elizabeth, I don't know if you can clarify that.
Because I think if you're a sub-recipient, you're worrying about something you don't need to worry about.
Elizabeth says they're the recipient.
Okay. So say the question again, Rob, because I didn't understand it.
If they, as the recipient, are also running their own projects, in this case, prevention and rapid rehousing.
Yep.
Will they also do their own reporting in HMIS, and will that be a part of a bundle? So they're effectively putting their bundle in, they're putting themselves in alongside other subrecipients inside of a bundle.
Right. So if you are the city and in your city department you have a homeless prevention office and you're using some ESG-CV funding for that, everybody that you serve out of that office has to go into HMIS, into an individual project that's set up in your HMIS. If that city also funded 3 other providers to do homelessness prevention, then when the information gets bundled, your project along with those 3 other projects are going to come in together and be bundled as one project. If the recipient is also the subrecipient, you need to wear 2 hats, and hopefully you're 2 different people, because you're going to get these hats confused if you're not. But you could just keep asking the questions, and we'll keep helping you untangle them. But you, as the subrecipient, have to collect the data, and you, as the recipient, will call for that data in your bundles.
Great. And then I'm going to go to Carolyn's question here, just sort of about the basic frameworks of what SAGE is doing, because they're new to this. So is it correct? The question is, SAGE typically collects beneficiary data for the CAPER, and the financial piece is new for ESG-CV. Is the new CSV capturing both financial and beneficiary data? Is this a new CSV or process?
ESG-CV is capturing financial data on ESG for the first time. So all we're asking for is ESG-CV financial data. In the future, you may see this come into the CAPER or you may not, but right now it's just in ESG-CV.
And I think that the additional part of that is about the CSV reporting. And so the CSV would just be pulling data from HMIS, and you would be required to manually enter the financial data. There's no financial reporting in HMIS, and so, and the other thing is that it's expenditure data, so that's not, you wouldn't be able to get that data from IDIS where you're getting draw information. So we're relying on recipients' internal financial records and getting data from your subrecipients to be able to provide that expenditure data on a quarterly basis.
Thanks, Marlise. I think that helped get to it. I have a hard time distinguishing between the CV and the CSV, so many terms. I might have given the question wrong. Okay, moving along. Can we cancel a subrecipient's project in SAGE? We have a sub that might get their funding recaptured. They were reported in the initial reporting period.
If they're in their own bundle, if the project is not bundled with other projects, we can delete them and pull them out. That's administratively, we'd have to do it through an AAQ. If it's bundled in with other projects, unless it's a huge project, we're not going to pull it, I don't think. But you can ask that and give us the details in the AAQ about how many people you think were misreported. I mean, at this point, HUD is making decisions that are both smart decisions in terms of getting the best quality data we can get and also being realistic on the amount of time and energy it takes to make a correction. We will definitely not reopen it for a small, tiny correction of a couple of people.
Right. All right, on a different topic than we had, on the HMIS lead call earlier, it was stated that an ESG-CV funded street outreach project funded only to provide PPE does not need to enter HMIS. Is that in writing somewhere?
I can take this one. I don't believe that we have answered this question in writing anywhere other than the AAQ. So if you do need some written documentation for your records, I recommend that you submit an AAQ. We can provide you with that response. But that policy determination has been made just because we're treating PPE as a cost that's sort of separate from the typical, the typical costs associated with engagement, like blankets, food, et cetera. Like these are life-saving COVID response-related costs, and so we're treating them differently. We're not expecting that PPE distribution is really falling under engagement per se. So please submit an AAQ, and we can help you out with that.
Thanks, Marlisa. Tiffany's asking, looking forward here, hopefully this scenario doesn't come up, but if a report gets rejected, what do you do next? It looks like we're not able to edit the report after they're submitted.
So the reports are generally getting rejected because there's something missing, like you said you funded an emergency shelter, but you didn't put a CSV in and you didn't put finances in. You're going to be able to go back in and just uncheck emergency shelter if that's what the problem is. But if the problem is that you funded emergency shelter, you put in a CSV, and you didn't put in expenditures, you're going to be able to edit the financial form and resubmit it. So unless it's a CSV upload issue, you can correct the mistakes that SAGE would identify yourself. So what's happening is SAGE is kind of giving a high-level identification of errors, and then the field office or the reviewer is looking down at it further. So I just know that if if you say you're funding shelter, we're going to look for a CSV, we're going to look for money. If those three things are there, they're there. If they're missing, they're missing, and then you can fix that. And if you have a question about how to fix it, hopefully the field office is telling you, but if they can't, if you put in an AAQ, we'll tell you.
Great. We've got a question. If our funded project is part of a collaborative effort, would we stop reporting when our ESG funds are expended or when the entire project ends?
When you stop, when you're out of ESG-CV. And we just want to remind you that an ESG-CV funded RRH project or homeless prevention project is not supposed to be in the HMIS with a project funded by some other funding source. So a collaborative street outreach project is a little different than a collaborative RH project.
Very good. Just coming in here, if I am understanding the explanations correctly, we are not to report on subrecipients that have been contracted/funded but have not had expenditures. We have just completed the contracting phase and do not expect to have any expenditures until the new year.
That's right.
I think at this point, Meredith or Scott, interrupt me if I'm correct, I'm not seeing questions that I don't have ticked off. If I've missed yours, please let me know. I've got one just came in here to me. If the subrecipient claims that their expenses from 10/20/20 through 12/20/20. However, they have not invoiced us. Do we report those expenditures in Sage HMIS for the quarter, or for the quarter we're invoiced? I'm not sure if I got that one.
So the expectation that we've said before on all of the quarterly report, the early webinars and on the state webinar, is that HUD expects you as the recipient to get the expenditures. That's your responsibility. So there needs to be expenditure information gathered from your subrecipients by the end of the month. If it doesn't come, well, then you deal with it like you would normally deal with it. You're either late with your report, or something else something else happens. But the expectation definitely is that if they've expended money, they're reporting it to you.
Great. And then, again, that's the end of the list that I have sitting here. If I've missed anyone's question, again, please repost. It wasn't on purpose that I skipped it.
Marlisa, did you have anything else?
No, I don't.
Then thank you, everybody, for joining us. We hope you have a happy holidays, however you celebrate those, and please stay safe. We'll talk to you again soon.